Alrighty, so there's an article that I saw pop up in my feed recently called The Election Story That Nobody Wants to Talk About. And with a title like that, I am already interested. So you and I, we are going to read it together. And on top of that, we are going to look at a whole bunch of fan art before we get into everything. Of course, we've also got a sponsor for today's video, so stay tuned for that as well. But this one is from Void Light, said was waiting for inspiration to do my first fan art. Then I heard the name Jail-chan while watching a fan art segment, and it just came to me. Might make a more polished version later. Anyways, my interpretation of what Jail-chan might look like. I don't even remember how Jail-chan came to be, but everything becomes a waifu on my channel, so I guess that happened. The next one we have is also from Voidalite. Said, more Jail-chan, now with a ring to carry around her keys. The pink one is the cell where people get locked up for war crimes. Jesus Christ. As always, thank you all for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it into the fan art section of the Discord. That said, we are currently sponsored as well, so I do want to go ahead and get into that. Right now, we are sponsored by HelloFresh. If you go ahead and hit !HelloFresh on the stream, or go into the description or the pinned comment on the video, there should be a link to my HelloFresh page, and you can use the coupon code that is down there in order to support my channel and what I do. But HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service. If you find yourself low on spoons when you're going to the grocery store, they are amazing at just getting the food to your doorstep, giving you easy step-by-step instructions on how to cook it, telling you how many calories it's going to be, and telling you how much it's going to end up taking in terms of your time. So it does, they do all the work for you, basically, except for the actual cooking, which you've got to do, which is, again, really easy thanks to the step-by-step instructions. That said, if you want to support my channel and what I do, they are helping out a fuck ton. So go ahead and check out all of that for HelloFresh. Thank you very much for sponsoring me. And with that said, let's go ahead and get into the actual article at hand. So, a Q&A with David Newert, America's foremost writer and thinker on far-right extremism, on what might happen if Trump wins or loses. Hydrate from Jassa Proxy. I will do that real quick. Professor Tesla says, Suris, what if I don't have enough spoons for that? Then it's a good thing that you can use forks. But continuing on here, David Newert was a 21-year-old newspaper editor in the Idaho Panhandle in 1978 when the Aryan Nation hate group showed up in town. He and his publisher arrived at a fateful decision. We decided, oh, these guys just want publicity and we're not going to give it to them, he said. Well, within about 3 years, that policy was completely discarded because what followed was an endless litany of criminality, culminating in '84 with the rampage of the order, including bank robberies, and assassination. It taught him a lesson that has informed his work for almost 5 decades as America's most important writer and thinker on far-right violence and extremism, and its incursions into the conservative mainstream. There is no acceptable choice but to shine a light on forces like these. He says you have to provide the reader with the context into what they're doing and what their beliefs are, and make sure you're not just doing the he said, she said journalism, but actively exposing them for people to see. I said, yes, certainly there are going to be people recruited because of your journalism, but many, many people will be repelled, and more importantly, officials and law enforcement will be prepared informationally for dealing with these guys. Okay, that's a really good start. Let's go ahead and begin here. The first question that was levied to him was, what are the basic outlines of the story no one wants to talk about? And David responds by saying, we are once again faced with a situation where a substantial block of American politics is talking about committing acts of violence and bringing down the government. We saw this before in 2020 in the run-up to the election and the aftermath. A lot of us held back, obviously. These guys have a long history of blowing off a lot of steam, talking and wildly exaggerating their actual ability to carry out a threat. But I think we saw on January 6th that was probably not the wisest view to take. We should have been paying more attention to what these guys were saying amongst themselves online. And what they're saying amongst themselves right now is probably disturbing, because they're talking about shooting their neighbors. Yeah, that's actually really terrifying. So To give context for this one right now, there is a large contingent of right-wing people who are doing everything in their power to bluster and blunder and talk about how they're going to kill all the pedophiles. And LGBTQ means grooming children. And grooming children means pedophiles. And there are people like me who try our very damnedest to tell everybody that, yeah, that sounds like a call to violence against gay people and a call to violence against trans people, as long as you connect those 3 sentences that they say pretty much all the time together. And then this weird thing happens. You get told it's hyperbole, and it's not something to focus on. Meanwhile, people who actually have been dealing with this kind of extremism as their career center point for ages say no, that it's not just bluster and blunder. You need to actually be paying the fuck attention to this and pointing it out and pointing out the ways in which these people are trying to do violence. Anyway, said let's talk about what exactly we saw before. Was the system blinking red in the run up to January 6th? To which David says, absolutely. I was trying to warn in my columns that they were really gearing up for violence. Then the article responds by saying, the response of a lot of people to warnings like those is that you're crying wolf. And he says, sure, I'm used to that. And that's the thing. It does come from this contingent that has a track record of just laying out a deluge of bullshit. But it's getting frantic and ugly enough that we're getting to the point where I don't think it's just hot talk. I suspect that there's guys involved in militias, particularly with Kamala Harris taking lead in the polls, running paramilitary training operations. Some of these guys are actually well-trained veterans. Some of them have combat experience. We did see a few of those people at January 6th, so yeah, that's definitely something to be a little concerned about, right? The article goes on to say, I know in part from your work that these things tend to come in waves. Do you tend to see them coming? I guess instead of saying the article says, I say, for people who are watching, maybe I'll just use voices for this so that it's easy to differentiate the characters involved in this particular conversation. So, I know in part from your work that these things tend to come in waves. Do you tend to see them coming?
To some extent. Mostly because I keep a finger on the pulse of what these guys are saying online amongst themselves. But it's incredibly hard to predict. We're talking about unstable people acting out. Except in the case of January 6th, when it wasn't just that. It was the unstable people were being ginned up.
I said, yes, sir, let's do the voices. I said, oh, geez, Bible. I'm not doing Bible Joker.
I'm not going to tell you to be washed in the blood of the Lord.
I'm not going to do that for this.
So let's talk scenarios. What if Trump wins?
Oh, there's 2 components. One is the immigrant front. The whole Minuteman ethos is going to come into play here, where these guys armed with AR-15s will claim we're just supplementing the government. We're just rounding people up and serving them up to the Border Patrol, which is what they did in Arizona for quite a few years. But this will spread to the national scale. The second component, it's pretty obvious that Trump and his minions basically hope that they can work the electoral count to a point where they can force the outcome of the election to either go through the Republican Congress or the Republican court. But either way, it'll be a de facto installment of a dictator. There will be massive protests. I think quite deservedly so. And the 3%ers, militias, the Proud Boys, who have all been gearing up for this, are going to come out to play. Not just defending the Trump administration, but attacking the protesters, and doing so with reckless abandon. They'll just call them Antifa. They have a ready-made excuse. If we're talking about the kind of rhetoric we're seeing in right-wing Telegram spaces, they're basically talking about how it will be decided by the bullet box, not the ballot box.
That's fucking insane. That's actually really creepy. Just people constantly in these private Telegram circles talking about the ways in which they're going to violently harm other American citizens because the people that they wanted to vote for didn't get their actual bit. And it's not like they're talking about, you know, somebody's going to cause a lot of harm, so we need to stop that harm. It's them going, no, Trump, my guy didn't get elected, so I'm just going to shoot my neighbor. But
What happens if the Democrats win?
Even a Joe Biden-sized victory, I think, could lead to instability. There will be contested states, like we saw in Arizona, as well as Georgia. These actors will show up at ballot counting centers as well as at other sorts of any other sort of body involved in counting and certifying the votes. We certainly saw that in the spring of 2020. These armed bodies of men entering state legislatures. I think that this is their hope, that they can create a lot of chaos in places like Arizona and Georgia, so that they can't actually carry out their votes, can't actually certify their votes. Then they will say, well, we'll throw it to the state legislatures.
which this is not the first time we've actually seen this. If you remember, we had, I think it was with Vice Rhino, a conversation about the loophole that they're going to try to use here. I don't remember exactly which video it was, but there was a video recently I did about the potential legal loophole that could be used to circumvent the actual voting. Falcon Fan says, let's go, it's going to be a bloodbath. No, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. The minute we start actually celebrating the death of our fellow American citizens is the moment that you need to go. I'm sorry, Falcon Fan. Based on that statement, you are no longer the token conservative person in the group, in this Discord. You are now gone. You are now going to be kicked out of the stream. I'm sorry. I cannot abide that. I will not abide that. That is not okay. And I will say this publicly to make a fool of anybody who wants to try to do this as well. We don't fucking celebrate violence here. We don't celebrate the violence against anybody who could be my loved one or your loved one or anyone like that. To do so makes you a goddamn monster. And every bit the fucking moron I have called you over the last few weeks. So now you are gone. No. Yeah, that was a Rubicon moment, Sarah Chikorita. You don't cross that line and stay in my community. You get kicked out. That just does not happen. Like that one dumb fuck ages ago that was trying to say we need to start killing all police officers. Like, yes, let's just kill other American citizens as well who just happen to have a job that we all generally agree is abusive and we don't like, but really? Really? Okay. Stop says, to be honest, I was wondering how long it would take to ban them. Fun to witness it live. Yep. Bohemian Lucy says, what's a Rubicon moment? A Rubicon moment is a moment where somebody crosses the Rubicon. It is considered a point of no return. That's what it means. Let me take a drink real quick. I've got phlegm building up in my throat from voices. Continuing on past that fun stuff.
Do you see any coordination on that between office holders and parliamentary actors?
I don't know that there's any communication. A lot of it's just that they're all swimming in the same soup.
And if Harris is inaugurated, are we in the clear?
No. I think that we'll have at least a year or two of dedicated domestic terrorism against various government entities, as well as liberal figures, including stepped-up attacks against drag queens. They'll lean quite heavily into the Christian nationalist authoritarian agenda against anyone supporting the, demonic liberal agenda.
Do you think appropriate law enforcement preparations are being made?
No. Nobody even talks about it, Rick. That's why this is a problem. Nobody is even recognizing that this is building. To counter this effectively, obviously, you want to have the DOJ tuned in and ready, and I'm not sure they are. Certainly, the FBI has shown itself to be extremely problematic under Christopher Wray in terms of the ongoing presence of dedicated Trumpists within the FBI. That's a wild card. Law enforcement is our main guardrail for these kinds of things, and we have Trumpist cops working on the local level. We have them working on the state level. And we have them working on the federal level. I think they actually played a large role in our failure to prosecute these January 6th insurrectionists adequately. Just think about how the Secret Service deleted all their freaking texts. And likewise, the FBI was not particularly forthcoming in their own internal communications regarding Proud Boys and Oath Keepers prior to January 6th, but we know that they're looking entirely in the wrong direction. They were planning on Antifa showing up in Washington and creating these riots. And that was part of Trump's plan too. That was going to enable him to unleash the Insurrection Act. And then they didn't show up. So they were just left to fight with cops, right? But they will continue to throw that boogeyman out there. The problem is that affects law enforcement. Because we have a lot of law enforcement who fall for this stuff, who watch Fox News and believe that Antifa's this deep, dark threat to America.
I said Antifa drink. Yeah, I need to do that real quick. Jeez. That voice actually makes acid come up in my throat. That's interesting. Said paramilitary, not parliamentary. Sorry, I misread it. I misread it. Sidebar. How do you guys think of the voices reading as opposed to me just reading it like normal and then responding? Anyway. So what I'm getting out of that is that, yes, the FBI knows that some of this shit is happening, but honestly, at the same time, they're not looking in anywhere near enough places where these people are actually congregating, like fucking Telegram, right? So the voices help big time. Do you like the voices? It makes it easier to understand who's talking. Fair enough. Fair enough. Then I will continue doing so. But I do need the drink here. I like it as long as you don't overstep what you can handle. That's fair. That's fair. But let's go ahead and continue here. I do agree with the idea that the reason that the FBI and other agencies are not really on board, not on the same page on a lot of these threats, is because the areas where they're having these conversations are either harder to track or they're just deliberately not looking in those directions. The idea that there's still a lot of Trump loyalists in our government, it's probably going to be impossible to get rid of them until the moment the dude dies, right? But still. Nitro says, avoid doing RFK Jr. voice. Your throat will thank you for not doing it. Yeah, I don't know how to actually do his voice. Hearing him speak makes my ears hurt. It sounds like he's in pain 24/7. Like that brain worm is just eating away at him. Is the media ready?
No. None of them are considering it as a factor. I think it's amazing that someone like Amanda Moore, who did this incredible undercover work exposing these neo-Nazi connections to the Republican Party, she can't even get an editor to pick up her work. All these editors and all these producers are all like, that's not interesting anymore. We don't care about that stuff. They're basically dismissing the problem. We don't need to keep talking about that sort of thing. It always baffled me, even back in the 90s when I was reporting on this stuff, that the political journalists that I knew, that I worked with, didn't seem to recognize that this work that I was doing had overlap with the work they were doing. You're dealing with domestic terrorism. We're dealing with politics, but politics is also how people behave around each other. This stuff creates disruption in communities. It creates a feeling of distrust in the ability of the government to keep each other safe. That's one of the reasons domestic terrorists do it in the first place. They're trying to undermine the public's faith in the ability of the government to keep them safe.
Do you still hear that old argument that covering it encourages it?
All the time. All the time.
Whenever I do a piece about this kind of thing, I get emails from people in vulnerable communities or just from liberal rural areas, terrified for their own safety at the hands of their neighbors.
Being from a rural area myself, The really great unreported story that the corporate media won't touch is, why don't we talk about these people in small towns who are Democrats in red cities or red states and what life is like for them? Because I can tell you, I mean, my family and friends who live in such conditions, they feel threatened. They feel intimidated. They feel like they have to keep their heads down. They don't put bumper stickers on their cars. They don't announce their politics in social situations, or they do it very discreetly, or usually only on a one-to-one basis. Mainstream media talk to the folks in the diners. What about the people who frequent the Indian restaurant in a small rural town? The Trump voters that nobody understands. Well, what about a Democrat voter who may live in these cultures where they're being aggressively threatened all the time? Yeah, no, okay, so from my experience, I actually am in a rural area. I live in the fucking woods. If I pointed my camera out the window right now, you would see nothing but trees and a hill. There's barely any way to identify where the hell I am because it's just fucking foliage everywhere. My nearest neighbor is my parents, and that's still like 200 feet away, right? Like, that's how living out here is everybody's got a goat farm or a horse farm or has cows, and they have a shit ton of land stretched out for ages. Saki and I were walking the dogs the other night, and as we were walking on the road, the neighbor's dog, like, jumped at the fence and started, like, gnawing at it like a fucking, like some kind of horror thing, right? Like they were from Pet Cemetery.
Vaporeon farmer moment.
Super Vaporeon, thank you for resubscribing. I haven't seen you in a while. That said, the thing that I do get from here is I am in a privileged position. Everybody around me knows my politics, and it prevents some of them from talking to me about politics. I tend to be pretty good in that regard, but I also have the privilege of being a white male who's cis. Just living out in the world, right? I'm in a very, very privileged position when it comes to my politics. But yeah, I generally don't like announcing my politics around. If somebody knows about my channel, then they'll know about my politics. It comes part and parcel with everything else. But if they don't know about my channel, I'm probably not the first person to tell them about it or, you know, anything else. The only time it really comes up is if somebody is like, hey, what job do you have? And I'll be like, YouTuber, because it's hard for me to lie about that, right? Jess says, who are you? I don't know. There an inordinate amount of homosexuality. What's an inordinate amount of homosexuality versus like an appropriate amount of homosexuality? Anyway, continuing on here. What about the Democratic Party? The Harris Walls people, both their political operations and their policy planning.
We don't have anybody in the forefront because the mainstream Democratic Party really doesn't want to run on this issue. Talking about how we need to prepare to counter these right-wing ideologues who are threatening violence really runs counter to the whole joy narrative. I don't know how we talk about it, but it's a reality we have to deal with. We need to have an adult conversation about what is likely after the election. Because these guys have worked themselves into such a powerful frenzy, I don't see them being able to just walk away from it if they lose. And they certainly won't walk away from it if they win. They're almost certainly going to engage in violence. I think there's going to be a lot of people hurt. And they're going to have multiple opportunities for this violence, and multiple venues and multiple excuses for this violence. So, we need to look at what those opportunities are and prepare the officials who are involved in getting the votes counted. Democrats should have a comprehensive ground game prepared. Certainly the first priority has to be really heavy security around ballots, particularly in swing states.
If Democrats, the media, and law enforcement don't get on the case, what should ordinary progressives do? Given the danger, should we protest?
Yeah, I don't see not protesting as an option if they shove Trump down our throats.
You can almost imagine having to take inspiration from the Freedom Rides, from Mississippi Summer, from Selma and the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
All I can tell you is that people should be getting ready. They should be talking to local and statewide law enforcement. Can we get this conversation going at least? People need to be talking about this.
And that ends it for the article. So,
The gist of it is basically that there is a threat of January 6th level violence happening again. On top of that threat, there is a very major lack of understanding of that threat within every single level of the United States government. The Trump wall or the Harris-Walz campaign can't really focus on it too much because it runs counterintuitive to their current campaign strategy, and local law enforcement don't seem to care about it too much until somebody's already thrown the first punch. Everywhere else, every other area of government seems to be woefully looking the other way when it comes to the Telegram circles and other private areas where these conversations are happening. And even when they are not looking away, you still have to deal with Trump loyalists who are in these sections of government that have been able to weasel their way in over the years.
Down to ride with the Neko.
Nitros, thank you for the resubscription. I appreciate it. But you have Trump loyalists in every single section of government, which makes it very, very hard to try to even bring this stuff up, because a lot of those loyalists, they want that violence to happen. They want that coup. Also, Son of the Red Joker, thank you for sharing 101 bits and getting us to a hype train. It's very hard to convince people who actively want that violence and want that chaos that they should be looking out for that violence and chaos and that it's a bad thing. And ultimately, it's terrifying that this isn't being talked about that much. The idea that we could see another January 6th. The idea that Trump's loyalists have already done this shit once before. There is absolutely nothing stopping them from trying to do it again. Also, an anonymous gifter gifted it 1 sub. Thank you very, very much. Nitro says, I hope the more Don the convict humiliates himself, the more it reflects on his guilt or on his cult. I would hope so. I would hope so. That said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. My take on this is basically what I said. I see this as a warning to everybody who believes for some reason that everything that happened on January 6th is not potentially going to happen again. It's a naive thought. We have all the evidence that it has happened once. The same person is involved this time in the United States politics, Donald Trump. We have no reason to believe that we are safe from this shit happening again. So just be fucking safe, everyone. That all said, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. If you have not checked out Suris Bits, where non-political content is going to be going from the stream, then go ahead and check it out. Ninjas, thank you for giving out 2 community subs. I'm going to try to put not scheduled content. I'm not going to ring myself into little bits trying to make sure the content goes out on the channel. I want it to be just a fun thing that I am building. So go check it out. If you like my commentary on stuff, but you want to move away from the politics stuff itself, you've got Lower Spoons, then go check out that stuff as well. Also, check out Suris MTG, my Magic the Gathering channel, where I am also doing all kinds of content lately. Tomorrow's video, which will probably be out by the time this video is out, is going to be on the modern format and how to join the modern format. But if you haven't checked out the channel already, I do a lot of stuff about Commander, about the state of the game. I have a podcast that I run on there as well. Honestly, as of right now, there's 154 videos on the channel, and I've only been going at it for less than a year. I've been making a lot of content over there, so if you want to see me talk about card game shit, there's an easy way for you to hear me talk about card game shit. That said, thank you all for watching. Go check out all the other areas of my channel that you can. I appreciate every one of you. And as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here.
Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do
full-time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full-time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.